These 5 towns were once home to some of the wealthiest people in America. Today, most of them are empty. Grand houses, private banks, opera halls, and mansions built with fortunes from gold, copper, and railroads, all standing abandoned, sometimes for over a century. Let's go through 5 of them and what actually happened. Town number 1, Bodie, California. Bodie started as a small mining camp, then exploded almost overnight once a major gold vein was discovered nearby in the late 1870s. Within a few years, the population jumped into the thousands and money poured in fast. At its peak, Bodie had banks, hotels, a railroad, and dozens of businesses built to serve the miners and mine owners who were making enormous fortunes out of the ground. Some of the mining companies operating here were worth staggering amounts of money for the time, and the men running them accordingly, building large homes and funding elaborate social events that seem strange to picture in what's now empty desert. The decline came just as fast as the boom. Once the richest veins of gold were exhausted, there was no other industry to keep the town alive. Miners and business owners left for the next boomtown. Banks closed and buildings were simply abandoned mid-use, some with furniture, dishes, and personal belongings left behind exactly where they were. Today, Bodie is preserved as a genuine ghost town, kept in a state of what's called arrested decay, meaning buildings are maintained just enough to stop them from collapsing, but nothing is restored or changed. Walking through it today, you can still see the shape of what was once a wealthy, thriving town, frozen at the exact moment the money ran out. Town number 2, Cahaba, Alabama. Cahaba has a very different story, tied to cotton wealth rather than mining. It was actually Alabama's first state capital, and for a period it was home to some of the wealthiest plantation owners in the entire region. Grand homes line the streets here, funded by the enormous profits of cotton production in the surrounding farmland. The town had a level of political and economic importance far beyond what its size would suggest today, largely because of the concentrated agricultural wealth flowing through it. Cahaba's decline came from a mix of factors rather than one single event. Repeated flooding from the nearby rivers made the location increasingly impractical, and once the state capital moved elsewhere, much of the town's political relevance disappeared along with it. The Civil War and the changes that followed reshaped the entire economic system the town depended on, and many of the wealthy families who once lived there relocated entirely. By the early 20th century, Cahaba was essentially empty, with buildings slowly taken apart or left to decay. Some literally moved elsewhere brick by brick. Today, it's an official historic site, with the outlines of old streets and building foundations still visible in the landscape, quietly marking where a wealthy, politically important town once stood. Town number 3, Thurmond, West Virginia. Thurmond's wealth came from coal, and specifically from its position as a major railroad hub for shipping coal out of the surrounding mountains during the early 20th century. At its peak, Thurmond was one of the busiest rail stops in the entire state, generating enormous revenue for the railroad companies and coal operators who controlled the area.
The town had banks handling large sums of money daily, and the men who ran the coal and railroad operations here accumulated significant personal fortunes, some of which funded impressive homes and buildings that seemed disproportionately grand for such a small, remote town. The decline was tied directly to changes in the coal and railroad industries. As diesel locomotives replaced steam engines, the specific type of rail operations that made Thurmond essential became unnecessary.
Coal production in the surrounding region also slowed over time, removing the core industry the town's wealth was built on. Unlike some ghost towns that emptied out quickly, Thurmond's decline was gradual, stretching across decades as businesses closed one by one and residents left for larger towns with more opportunity. Today, only a handful of people still live there, and much of the town is preserved as part of a national park, with its old buildings standing as a quiet record of the coal fortunes once made and lost here. Town number 4, Gilman, Colorado. Gilman was built entirely around a large zinc, silver, and lead mining operation high in the Colorado mountains. And for decades, it was a genuinely prosperous company town. The mining company that ran Gilman built housing, a hospital, a school, and other facilities directly for its workers and their families. And during its most profitable years, the mine generated significant wealth for its owners and investors. The town's entire economy revolved around this single mining operation, which made it unusually dependent on the fortunes of one company. Gilman's ending was sudden rather than gradual. Environmental contamination from decades of mining was eventually discovered to be serious enough that the entire town was evacuated within a short period, and it was later designated as an environmental cleanup site by federal authorities. Unlike towns that slowly emptied as opportunity dried up, Gilman was essentially shut down all at once, with residents given a limited window to leave. Because of the environmental designation, Gilman has remained frozen and largely inaccessible for decades, with homes, the old hospital, and company buildings still standing exactly as they were left, overlooking the valley below. It stands as one of the more unusual examples on this list, a town whose wealth and its ending were both tied directly to this same industrial operation. Town number 5, Kennecott, Alaska. Our final town is Kennecott, built around one of the richest copper deposits ever discovered in North America, high in the Alaskan wilderness. The copper found here was so valuable that a private railroad was built specifically to transport it out of the mountains, an enormous and expensive undertaking that only made financial sense because of how much money the copper was worth. The company running the mine became extraordinarily profitable, and the town built to support the operation included features far more advanced than most remote settlements of that era, including a hospital, a recreation hall, and a functioning school. Kennecott's decline came down to simple economics. Once the richest concentrations of copper ore were extracted, continuing to mine the site became less profitable, especially given how expensive it was to operate this far from any major city. The company made the decision to shut down operations relatively abruptly, and much of the town emptied out within a short period afterward. Because of its extreme isolation, Kennecott was largely left untouched for decades rather than being torn down or repurposed. Today, the buildings still stand against the backdrop of glaciers and mountains, a striking visual reminder of just how much wealth was extracted from this remote location, and how completely it was abandoned once that wealth ran out. 5 towns, 5 different industries, but the same basic story each time. Enormous wealth built a town almost overnight, and once that wealth source disappeared, so did almost everyone living there. If you found this interesting, subscribe for more breakdowns on wealth, real estate, and the places money built and then left behind. Let us know in the comments which of these 5 surprised you the most. See you in the next one.